Hey, right now we're looking at my Azure console, and this is an AKS cluster that I've stood up using Terraform. Now, it's clearly called Faithful Mosquito. You might be wondering why. That's a very strange name. Well, I followed this quick start example for standing up an AKS cluster in Terraform, and that uses the random animal provider. So that's how we ended up with such a strange name, and I'm keeping it. I love this name. Anyway, I'm going to copy that. And the reason I'm starting out here is I want to show a new feature in CloudWorks where you can import externally created clusters. So I have this cluster in Azure, but I can import that into CloudWorks. So let's see that in action. I'm going to come to projects in the CloudWorks dashboard. And instead of adding a project, I'm going to click on this drop down. It's going to say import existing cluster. Cool. That brings up a panel. Which cloud do I want to connect to? Well, I'm going to connect to Azure. And then it'll ask me which cloud credentials I want to use. So any one of the Azure accounts that I've connected, I could use. Now, I've got a few here. I'm going to use that one up top. And it's going to ask me, once it loads, which cluster I want to import. And it's Faithful Mosquito. There it is. Right? So that's what I'm going to name it because I am running with that name. And it's going to give me several different options for import. Cloud credentials, the first option. That allows us to import this cluster as kind of a host cloud where we would deploy other Kubernetes clusters. And in order to do that, that would take the form of vClusters. So a good way to think of the cloud credentials import type is you're going to leave the management aspects in AKS, but you're going to still want to create other child clusters, child vClusters in this host cluster. That's what that's used for. Then if we want read-only, well, that's pretty obvious. It's a read-only project. So you can import it, you can see what's going on, but you can't really manage it. But I'm going to select this option, Manage Project. This is where you get all of the features, all of the management features of CloudWorks in your AKS cluster. So even though I created it in AKS, I can still pull it in here, and that's what I'm going to do. And I'm also going to use a Taikun Ingress Controller, right? I haven't stood up any Ingress, so I want Taikun CloudWorks to do that for me. So it's going to import, and when it's done, we'll actually see all the project details. So that takes a second, and now it's healthy, right? So now it's ready for me to come in here and start managing stuff. Cool. So it's going to load up, and in this initial release, you can do a lot of stuff with this managed Kubernetes cluster. But one thing that hasn't been released yet is the ability to manage your VMs, your Azure VMs, or whatever cloud you're running in, right? So you would normally see those down here. That'll be released in the future. But for now, I can still do a lot of stuff here. You can see I can already monitor all of the resource usage going on in my cluster. I can look at LiveOps and I can see everything that's been released, everything that's been stood up in this cluster, just like I would in any other managed cluster, right? Right now it's reading all those resources, and sure enough, here are all my services. Here are all my Helm releases. Everything that I would see in a Kubernetes cluster that I stood up in CloudWorks, I can see here because it's fully managed. And I can also manage my kube configs the same way I would with a cluster that I stood up using CloudWorks. That's pretty cool. So no matter what cloud I stood this cluster up in, I can manage it alongside all of my other clusters that I'm managing in CloudWorks. How awesome is that? Thanks for watching.